Hello folks. Right, as you can see I am not on the road. I have returned. I'm in my own back garden, and a lot of people have asked questions about the Noble Steed, have asked about my kit, so I thought I'd do a bit of a video that talks about it and explains what I've used, why I've used it and how I've used it. I'll try and do the best I can, but bear in mind before I start this, I am not a proficient cycle tourist. This last 40 days has been my first ever experience of cycle touring, so I very much jumped in straight at the deep end and just figured things out as I went. I sought a bit of advice before I left, but generally made it up as I went along. So there may be things that I've done that you've done before and thought, actually what he's doing is ridiculous. So don't take this as an instructional video, just take it as a bit of a guide as to what I've done. So if you've seen any of the footage before, you probably know that this, or rather this was new. This is a Dawes Super Galaxy from 1992, so it's 30 years old. Happy birthday Noble Steed in 2022. And it's a Reynolds 531 steel frame, so British made steel frame. Very reliable, very sturdy, very tough all-round touring bike. And I bought it for that reason. It was going to be reliable, it was going to be tough. It's made of steel, so if I break it, in theory it can be welded back together. It's quite simple mechanics really. Basic cycle maintenance will keep this running, and it did. So I was very pleased with it all in all. I'll go through a little bit of the bike specifics later on, because I'll be able to move the camera and get closer. But for now, I'll talk about the sort of setup in general. So, start at the front, let's work back. We are on Schwalbe Marathon Plus Tour tyres, and they are, what are they? The 35mm tyres, so they're sort of the biggest size I could get that would fit inside the mudguards. I wanted to get something that was usable on road and off-road, because I knew I was going to be on tracks and dirt trails and cycle paths and all sorts. So they're good on road, but they've also got a bit of rugged chunkiness to them, and they're pretty much bomb-proof. I never had a single puncture. I had one flat tyre, and I've no idea how I got that flat tyre, because the inner tube was absolutely fine. Possibly somebody let it down overnight. But yeah, 40 days of cycling in British winter, in all kinds of weather, in all kinds of terrain, not a single problem with the tyres. So Schwalbe Marathon Plus Tours, couldn't recommend them highly enough. And the people from Schwalbe are lovely, so definitely check those guys out. The front wheel, inside the front wheel, down here, this is a NOS or NOS. Well, actually no, sorry, all the way around. SON, S-O-N. I'm reading it backwards. That is a SON Dynamo Hub. So the hub inside there, as it's rotating around, provides electricity, which continuously runs the front light. I may even be able to demo it. Hold on. If I spin this round, if I spin, I make that working. There we go. I was holding the front brake then. So yeah, that consistently runs while I'm cycling, which is a brilliant safety feature, and it lights the way in the dark. So brilliant piece of kit that. Cannot recommend this enough. So massive thank you to Nick Nolan, who provided this for me. So he purchased the front wheel, the Dynamo Hub, and the front light for me to use during my tour. On the proviso, I do return them to him afterwards. But I can't recommend them highly enough. So the SON Hub and the SON front light, absolutely amazing. I did make an addition to that. I did put on, you can see it, there is a sine wave revolution, which is a USB charging point, which is on like a piggyback connector to the front Dynamo Hub. So this I can use as I'm cycling to charge up a power pack, so I can then have electricity as I'm going. So it's essentially a rolling power station. Obviously if you turn the front light off, you do get a bit more charge out of this little device here. However, I barely used it. I used it more out of an experiment really. It was quite an expensive piece of kit. It's a very good piece of kit. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's super tough for a tiny little thing. It's very rugged. But I had two big Anchor power packs with me, each of which will do about 6 phone charges. So every now and again when I stopped up anywhere with power, I would top those up, and that generally provided me with enough power to keep me going. So I didn't actually use that much. In fact, I could have got by without it. But anyway, I had it. So next up, let's see, front panniers. Let's talk about the rack first. So this is a Bontrager front carry, I think, front carry or carry forward front rack. And that was very kindly donated by Chris Presty, thank you very much. And it's a brilliant rack, really do love it. It doesn't quite fit this bike, I had to kind of mould things around to make it fit. I'll talk about those later. But aside from that, if it does fit your bike well, fantastic rack, can't fault it. I ended up breaking one of the mounts on the 39th day or 38th day. I broke one of the pannier rack mounts at the front, but that's because I've kind of retrofitted it to this bike and it was probably under a bit of undue strain. But brilliant rack, it gives you the low rider capability, so you can put low riding front panniers on. Also gives you a big flat platform at the front which you can put bags on and things, but it also gives you various sort of what they call bosses, mounting hubs, so you can actually screw things in with the standard mounting screws that you would for most other bits and pieces on your bike. So the same size bolts that you put the pannier rack on will also fit into the pannier rack, so you can attach lights and other bits of kit. Fantastic idea. So yeah, love that rack. The panniers, front and rear panniers are all Caradese panniers. Now these Caradese panniers are possibly older than I am, so I sought those out second hand on eBay. I found someone selling a variety of them. I tried a few different ones. I went for these. These are slightly smaller than the rear ones, but these are actually rear panniers that I've put on the other way around to give me a bit more volume in the front. I've been quite careful not to put too much heavy stuff in there, but I wanted the space and the volume really. So they've been absolutely amazing. It also, by getting the front pannier, by putting a rear pannier on the front, I then got the rear pocket, so that gave me an extra bit of pocket space. So things like empty drinks bottles, things that are bulky and take up a bit of space but no weight to them, they were great to put up front here. So front panniers up there. In these, this one, which is the one that's, especially in the UK, is the one closest to the curb. This is the one where I put all my sort of bits and pieces I needed throughout the day. So this jacket was in there, so if I suddenly got cold, this was a big bit of warm bit of kit, so if I was having lunch or something, I could chuck this on. I would have spare cycling bits, so spare hats and gloves. I would have my sunglasses, I would have my selfie stick and other sort of things I would need to hand as I went throughout the day. Also had my loose lunch and things like that, so sandwiches or snacks and things like that would be kept in there. So that was all the stuff I needed throughout. Also had a very quick change of clothes, like a dry thermal in there. And I put those bits in that one because that was the front curbside bag. So that meant whenever I was riding, if I was stopping, I could quite quickly reach to it, but I was reaching away from the road, so I was reaching into it. So I wasn't leaning into the road to get stuff, I was leaning away from it. So that's why I chose that one to be my kind of throughout the day big bits and pieces bag. But because this one is the closest to the curb, that's the one that tends to bump into everything. Whenever you're stopping near a hedgerow or a grass verge, if anything that's higher than that bag, that it would crunch into that bag and it would take all the hit on that one bag. So that's why the brackets on that bag took most of the force. Now it was brilliant that I used old canvas or waxed cotton canvas bags. I did that for a good reason. I did it because they'd be super tough. Caradese cotton canvas panniers are tough as nails, so you can't really fault those. But what I didn't think of, using old second-hand ones, the bags themselves are amazing, but the brackets, so the clips that clip them onto the pannier racks, the brackets themselves and the rivets that are used to attach them, and the webbing straps that are there, have all been used for years and they've probably taken a bit of abuse, so those bits did start to wear out and break. So it wasn't the bag's fault. Caradese panniers are amazing. It was me not really thinking it through that those parts are probably the parts that have a shorter lifespan and they start to wear out. So I should probably have replaced the clips and the webbing and stuff before I went, or at least replaced the rivets that held them in. So I did suffer a bit for that and I had to sort of sort them out as I go. I did end up tying these front bags on with string. I put sort of string wrapped around to the rack to hold these tight to stop them wobbling, to take some of the force off those brackets, and that did seem to work. So yeah, those front bags, amazing. They do attach at the bottom as well. Really important, make sure you've got solid attachment points at the bottom. As we work back, on top, big dry bag. This is my sleeping bag. I know it looks massive, but that's because it's a winter bag and it's a synthetic bag. I use synthetic rather than down because it can get wet and it still works, still keeps you warm. This up front was quite a good idea because it's quite big and bulky, but it doesn't weigh much, so I didn't want that on the back. So that was quite good at the front, out of the way. Well, not out of the way, but you know, sort of in a decent place. The bungees on top that hold it on. These are brilliant because it also gave me an attachment point to put loose bits and pieces. So this is my waterproof jacket, so if it wasn't raining I would put it there. It meant I could get to it quickly if it was raining, so that was quite useful. Also I would tuck in gloves and things like that. I had a face mask if I was going to the towns and cities, if I had to stop anywhere, so I would tuck a face mask under here. Banana skins go under there quite easily, so until you get to a bin, or wrappers and things, so they were really useful. I'm really glad I had that there. Working back, just going to check you're still recording because that would be annoying. You are, good. Still getting used to videos. Working my way back, up front is a GPS device. This is a Wahoo Element Bolt. Brilliant little piece of kit. This is the Mark II or version 2, so it has a colour screen. Super easy to use, very intuitive, simple zoom in, zoom out, big buttons for changing the page or changing the screen. I just use this for navigation. That was it. It does millions of other things, measures like wattage and power and incline and the hills and the speed and all that kind of stuff. I generally just use it for navigation. There was a little bit on top which would say the speed I was going and the time. I put the time on the front screen so we didn't have to look at the watch. But yeah, that was brilliant. In the bag back here, this is just a cheap standard sort of online purchase frame top bag. I have my phone in there, so that I can talk to that quite easily through Bluetooth. And if I needed sort of to change navigation, or if I got into a town and needed some more precise navigation, I would bring up Google Maps or something on my phone and use that. So I've got 2 navigation devices in one. Spare light. So up on top here, I've got a little lazy spare light, and this is a rechargeable one, so I can recharge this from my power packs, which are charged from there. That was kind of a spare in case I had any problems with that, which I didn't. But it was also, I can put this on flashing, so I could have that on permanent light and that on flashing. So if I was on really busy roads, it gave me a bit more visibility. Also, you can take this off and use it as a torch. If you've suddenly got a problem, you can take this off, ping it on, look at what you're doing. If you fix something, turn it off again, and then good to go. Bell. Decent loud bell, really useful, especially on big promenades and stuff where there's lots of people. Spent a lot of my time on the seafront, so always people around and weaving in and out of people with a big cumbersome bike. Bell was really handy. I know it's not part of the bike, but helmet. I went for a head case because they're an amazing partner of mine, but any helmet, to be honest, I wouldn't dream of going on a cycle tour without one now. Very scary moments in heavy traffic, so yeah, do not go on a cycle tour without a helmet. What else? So as we work back, drink bottles. I've got these brilliant Sig Drinks Bottles, metal, reusable, going to last forever unless you do something amazing to them. And you can change in and out the top, so you can have the sort of drinkable top, you can change it for a normal spout, you can take off the top to put larger stuff on ice in. Obviously I didn't do that, but good for putting in the sachets and things like that. So that one up front, and then the rear one is a Sig thermal flask, so I could have a warm drink as I went. So first thing in the morning when I have a breakfast, I would make a hot drink, have that on the go, and always good to have a hot drink with you. So whenever I passed a cafe or something, I'd top that up. So if I got cold, instant hot drink, perfect, gets your heat back up. If you stop to have lunch or something and you used to get really, really chilly, having a hot drink afterwards to keep your temperature up, vital. So really recommend that. And I had another one of those bottles in the rear pannier, so I could swap it out if I needed to. Pump up here, I had to swap my pump out. I've got a better pump, and this one goes up to about 70 or 80 psi, I think, so I can actually pump up the tyres to 65, which is what I wanted, or at least till they felt hard. I did have a pressure gauge, but I didn't find it very reliable, so I just went until they were hard to squeeze. That seemed to work. This little thing, this, very simple, is a Velcro strap. And the reason that's there, despite it being reflective, it's not there for visibility. This was to strap around here, so I could strap the front wheel to the frame. So when I was standing the bike up, or if I was working on it or something, because you've got all this weight up front, the handlebars just tend to swing. As soon as you let go of the handlebars, as soon as you prop it up somewhere, they would just swing around and bash into stuff. So securing the front wheel to the frame was a brilliant way of keeping the bike from falling over. I can't remember where I picked that tip up from, something online I think. But fantastic piece of kit. It's just a Velcro strap that wraps around the frame. There, job done. Check I'm still recording. We are. we're back. Little saddle bag. I've just put this on temporarily because I'm already de-kitted, but it's there just to see. So in this one, basic bike maintenance stuff. I had a head torch in there. I had some all-weather lube for the chain. I had my bike tool. I had some. What else is in there? There's something else in there. Some electrical tapers in there, and I think there's a little mini torch as well in there. A few little bits and bobs, or tyre levers and things like that. Very rarely needed it actually, to be honest. The multi-tool, yeah, used that a few times, but generally a lot of the stuff is in there just in case. Although the all-weather lube, that on the chain daily. Winter on bike, so winter bike touring is brutal on the bike. Constant, just grime, grit, sludge, salt, all sorts on the drivetrain. So having a decent supply of chain lube with you, really useful. A charge spoon saddle. Everyone will talk about all sorts of different saddles. Many people will recommend Brooks leather saddles. I'm sure they're amazing. They're just really expensive and you have to wear them in. I didn't really have the time to break it in. This bike came with one, but that saddle was broken into whoever owned it before me, so it wasn't right for me. So I swapped it out. Charge spoon, just instantly comfortable, and about 25 quid. Brilliant saddle, absolutely amazing. No problems with that whatsoever for the entire journey, so I can't recommend that highly enough. And it looks quite cool, it's quite in keeping. Roll mat. I was umming and ahhing for ages about whether to take a roll mat or not, because, I'll tell you why in a minute, I've got some other stuff. But I took one. It's a bit cumbersome, a bit awkward, but actually having it on here, it's completely out of the way. I didn't notice it at all, it didn't get in the way, and it gave you extra storage. So in here I'd have an empty drinks bottle, I have my my helmet cover, a little flannel. This is like a mini sport towel. I would use this to dry the inside of my tent and stuff, or dry off the bike in the morning. Wring it out, flip it on the back, it will dry in the wind, good to go. I also had some marigolds, like rubber gloves. They were brilliant if I was doing maintenance on the bike or if I was packing the tent away to keep my hands dry. That was fantastic. So yeah, a few other bits in there. I'd also tuck any rubbish throughout the day, any sort of empty wrappers or sandwich bags or anything like that, any sort of rubbish I had, I would put it in there out of the way. And rubbish from the evening, from when I was making dinner and stuff, any leftover rubbish I would put in there in a little bag and then chuck it in a bin as I went past. That was quite useful actually. Just be wary, this does fill up with water, so you have to sort of every now and again in heavy rain drain your roll mat out. This big red bag at the back, this is my nighttime kit basically. So in that is my tent, my inflatable mattress, or thermarest, whatever you want to call it. It's not a thermarest, but you know, one of those. And something called an Arctic mat, which is made by Snugpack. It's basically a flat sleeping bag that you put on top of your thermarest or your insulated mat, and it gives you like an extra layer of warmth. So I had my roll mat on the floor under my tent on top of the roll mat, thermarest inside the tent, Arctic mat on top of that, and then my sleeping bag on top of that. Toasty warm. But that is why I was umming and ahhing about the roll mat. But I'm so glad I did take the roll mat, because not only did it insulate the floor of the tent, it protected the bottom of the tent and kept it dry, but it also gave you like a working platform. So if you were packing your tent away and stuff in the morning, you could do all that on the roll mat. It didn't really matter if it got wet, but it meant you weren't doing it on the mud, so you kept nice and clean. So I would definitely recommend a roll mat, despite what other mattresses you're taking. Take a roll mat. And the rear panniers, obviously same sort of thing at the front. They're slightly bigger, but if you're having this style of pannier, these have got a much bigger flap on top, and that bigger flap makes it much easier to close if you're packing extra things in. You can also kind of shove stuff underneath. These ones are a little bit tight to shove things under. Those ones, a bit bigger, which really works. Also in there, a lock. I debated for ages whether I take a lock or not, whether I take a decent one or a slightly smaller one. I decided to take one, even though it's quite heavy, just a simple combination lock. Because when you're in your tent at night, the last thing you want to be doing is worrying about whether your bike is going to be there in the morning. Also, if you have to stop in towns to get things, which I did a lot, I locked it up. Fair enough, no one is going to steal it really, because I was struggling to move it and sort of manhandle it and ride it. It takes a lot of getting used to riding a heavy bike like this. So I'd be amazed if someone could be bothered to actually try and steal a fully loaded touring bike, but you never know. Peace of mind, if nothing else, that gave. So that was also good. However, another thing of this, where it's really, really windy, especially in winter touring, I would use this just to sort of pin it to a tree to stop it blowing over. So that was useful. Right, what I'm going to do now is take the camera, and talk with it. Going on the move. So, another little close-up inspection. As I said, you've got the points on the pannier rack, which we can bolt stuff to, which these are really useful. As you can see, I've bolted the light to them down here. I know some people might be questioning wrapping the cable round, whether it's going to create heat or not. I'm winter touring, it's no problem for me. So there, down there, that is the Son Dynamo Hub, which links into all the sort of electrics here. They are kind of waterproof, but I tape them up with electrical tape just in case. I'm just, you know, paranoid like that. Anyway, so that's that section down there. In here, so if I can get to there, so this bracket here, which bolts to this main boss here, the one on this side that goes in here, that's the one that broke. Again, that's no fault at all of the pannier rack. That's probably just me trying to retrofit it. Those big red aluminium washers in there, they're not supposed to be there. They're basically just massive aluminium spacers I put in just to kind of make it fit. The reason I did that, this rack comes with this mounting point here, which would normally go into the sort of bolt position here on the front fork. You can see on the rear here, there's a little position there. Normally, bikes will have a front sort of screw hole in here that would bolt to there. I don't know if you can see. Can you see it in there? Yeah, maybe. I don't have one. The front of my fork is flat. So, I got a bit creative. This piece of metal here goes down along that way, out here and up into there and bolts through, and then the mudguard clamp bolts onto the back of that. That's quite simply a stainless steel mending plate that I bent into shape and then bolted from either end. As you can see, I made it myself. It says JWCFC, that's James Rag Cycle for Change. Very proud of that I was. But that took about 20 minutes to make, and it's been absolutely bomb-proof the whole way around. Hasn't come loose, hasn't wobbled, hasn't rattled, hasn't squeaked. Really solid and brilliant. And what it also meant, as I said, this rack worked, but it wasn't quite fit because I've got cantilever brakes. So this, even if I did have the front mounting point on the frame, and if I bolted this to the frame, this part of the rack would have fouled up with the brakes, so it still wouldn't have worked. So I had to leave this gap and space it out, but it worked. It brought all the weight forward and the front pannier rack kind of worked. So yeah, pleased with that. These, just a standard roof rack tie. I had to buy some of these from a car place or something as I was driving through. I used these to bolt the rear, to sort of strap the rear panniers on to stop them bouncing around. I was using bungees, but the bungees I found bounced around quite a bit, so I swapped out for straps, and that gave the panniers a bit more resistance and made them a bit stronger. On the back here, you can see down the rear, down the sort of seat tube, whatever you call it, they are spare spokes. So I just taped some spare spokes to the frame, just so I had some in case I needed some. Didn't have to use them, but it's always good to have spares. But spokes are quite awkward things to put somewhere. So where do you put a pair of spokes and not risk them getting bent? So that's where I put them. There's a little look at that jobby. So this little thing, the sine wave revolution, this just wires straight down the fork and piggybacks onto the Son Dynamo Hub. Brilliant little device. As I said, I didn't use it, but if I was out somewhere a bit more rugged and a bit more exposed and remote, I'd definitely use it. This is from my son. This is a wooden gonk that he gave me for Christmas. Mounted it on there for good luck. That's certainly not tactical part of the bike, but very useful otherwise. Other features on the bike that I love, bar end gear shifters. So this one is the front derailleur, and this is a friction based gear movement. The one on the other side over there is the rear derailleur, and that can be indexed, but I didn't have it indexed. That little sort of metal D-ring you can see on it, you can twist that, and that changes it from index to friction. That means it either clicks into gears or you just guide it yourself when it's on friction. I had them both set on friction because it just gave me complete control over where my derailleurs were and what gear I was in, and I found that to be brilliant. I quite liked having the gears up here on the end bars. rather than the sort of newer, fancier side shifters on the brake levers, because it freed up a bit of space. I didn't have to worry about having sort of any other gizmos and gadgets and wires and cables up here. It's all very tidy. All the cabling is hidden inside underneath the wraps, so all the cabling's under here. The cables from the gears run underneath here, and then it all goes up, comes out here, and then feeds through to wherever it needs to go. Now you might be wondering, blue, red, blue and red, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. Why have I got red and blue all over the bike? Quite simply, it's my boy's favourite colours. So one of my sons loves red, one of my sons loves blue. There's no point in doing a bike ride like this if it's impersonal. You have to make your bike part of your journey, I think, and it becomes an element, sort of another member of your team. So it was me and the noble steed all the way through. So we had a great time, and making the bike a bit personal to you really helps. Also, while I'm up here, let's talk about the sort of headset, if you like. So the original handlebars were much narrower, and had a old-fashioned quill stem, which was kind of a stem that came up to about here and then angled down. So the handlebars, instead of being up here, were way down here. So I had to swap everything out. So I got rid of all the original stem and handlebar headset setup, kept the bar, kept the brake levers, kept the end shifters. So I got new handlebars, although they were second hand. I got this part second hand, and I got a new one of these, this sort of stem adapter. So this gave me a lot more height. It was originally around here somewhere. I've raised it all the way up to here, and then chucked on a much newer, more modern, wider set of handlebars. These are actually race bars, so the drop on them is a lot smaller. It doesn't reach way out here, and they don't sort of drop right down low. They're a lot more compact. This meant that the bar shift, or the gear shifters, were much higher. They're out of the way, so it gave me a bit more room for my knees and things. So I'm quite glad I did that, because I don't really ride using this. I have got some padding under here. I didn't really ride using this. Occasionally I'd rest my hand there, but generally not. Most of the time I would have my hand either on the hood, on the corner, on here like that, or occasionally I would just kind of rest my hands like that to give me a bit of a, so I could sit up straight and have a bit of rest. I quite often would just sort of rest my hand at the side here. You end up doing all sorts of things. You hold it in odd places, to be honest, just to give you a change of scene. These, well, both sides obviously, are double wrapped. So you've got first layer of wrapping, then there's some gel padding up in here, and right up to here on top of the levers, gel padding all the way along, to give you a bit of a bigger, chunkier grip, and also a bit more padding, and also a bit more insulation. I experimented with it as I was riding along. If I held it down here, really cold, up on here, a bit warmer, just because it had that gel padding in it, and that made a massive difference for winter touring. You might see you've got the second Wahoo mount. That just meant if I wanted to, I could put the Wahoo down there, just to give it a scene. I could sort of put this on. If I had the helmet cover, if that was wet, I would sometimes hang it on here, just to sort of have it flap around and dry in the wind. But most of the time, obviously, the Wahoo was up here. But you know, gives you another option, really. So yeah, that was quite helpful. What else? Anything else interesting I can talk about? I don't think so, really. That's pretty much it, to be honest. Oh, the pedals. Yes, I will talk briefly about the pedals. So, as you will see, these are just standard, fairly cheap, I think they're DMR or something from Halfords, fairly cheap mountain bike pedals. When I started the journey, I had lovely, beautiful looking, I think is it MKS, flat metal touring pedals with metal toe cages. They were brilliant, but I hadn't really twigged. Well, I tried them on and I used them with trainers, and then when I actually started riding, I wore these. These are essentially sort of fabric walking boots, well, fabric and leather mixed walking boots, and I did that because I needed one pair of shoes that would do everything. So I went for these because sometimes I was walking, sometimes I was pushing, sometimes I was pedaling, so I needed something that did absolutely everything. So what I did, as I was riding along, I found that my feet were too far back on the pedal. If I spin around again, the wrong way around to show you really, let's try and use the other hand. So if you imagine this is my foot, when I was starting I couldn't get my foot, I had a toe cage here, and I couldn't get my walking boot on my foot further than here. So I was actually in kind of a classic position with the ball of my foot around here somewhere. but occasionally I felt I wanted to move my foot forward just to give it a bit of varied position, and I couldn't do that with the toe cage where it was. So I just kind of left it as it was and put up with it. But then eventually I decided to, because I was getting quite knee pain, I wanted to move my foot around a bit. So I took the cages off, which worked. I could then put my foot somewhere else, but it meant that my foot was slipping all over the place because there was no grip on the pedal. So I had to then get rid of those pedals, find somewhere to buy some cheap mountain bike pedals, and these were brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Simple, they're not screw-ins, they're just simple moulded plastic pegs. Perfect grip for my walking boots. It meant I could put my foot wherever I want, and it was a nice big wide flat platform. So these, whilst only costing like 20 quid or something, were absolutely fantastic. Much better than the pedals I had before. The other pedals were amazing, but just not ideal for touring in walking boots. And yeah, absolutely love these, and if these wear out, I'll buy another pair. They also come in red as well, which is convenient. Maybe tempted to get one red, one blue. So yeah, what else? Anything else? Oh, I did get some little, what do you call it, like bolsters, I suppose. The little additions for the valves. I quite like these actually, not only because they're colourful, but mainly for this part here. It just gave a bit more solidity to the valve, so it doesn't really rock around as much when you're trying to pump it up. A good thing about this pump, I don't know if I can do it with one hand. Yeah, this part comes out on a hose, so it's not pushing and pulling on the valve. So actually another element to that is quite good, that it has a hose. It also does the two sizes of valve, so that was quite useful. What's that called? Auto switching dual head. I don't even know who that's made by. What's it say? XLC, whatever that's called. XLC pump. Very good little pump. Quite compact, quite light, and pumped up decent pressure. So yeah, I think that is it. Only other thing I can think of to mention, Cantilever brakes. They worked absolutely fine. Loads of people thought they wouldn't because of all the weight. They did generally work fine. The only thing I would say is I burnt through so many pads. I think this is the 5th set of pads. So 6 weeks, well, just under 6 weeks, 5 sets of brake blocks. As I was going along. As soon as you get the sort of horrible wet conditions, you just start rinsing through these, and yeah, I think one of them, less than a week, I burnt through the first set, so really had to replace those quite a lot. But once you get the hang of doing it, it doesn't take long. If you've got a rest day, it gives you a quick job to do, so fairly straightforward. I think that's it. Surely that's it. Can't think of anything else that there is to talk about on this bike now. So there you go, a full roundup of the Noble Steed and all the bits and pieces on it that I had. What I will do again later is I will take all the bits and pieces off, lay them out on the floor, and talk about the individual pieces of kit that I took with me. So not just the bike and not just the bike setup, but the actual bits of kit that I took with me and why, and if I used them, if I didn't. I'm pretty sure I used everything. So yeah, that's it for now, folks. Hope you enjoyed that little Cycle for Change bike check, and I will catch up soon. Bye.